Mental Health Momentum, a Silicon Slopes podcast. I'm Dr. David Morgan. I'm a licensed psychologist and the Director of Mental Health Awareness here at Silicon Slopes. And on this podcast, we talk about the effect of mental health on businesses and individuals and society as a whole, and we look for solutions and answers as well. Today, I'd like to introduce my guest, Becky Kemp. A little bit about Becky. She is dedicated to spreading goodness and igniting transformation and is a leading voice in unlocking the power of words. As a leadership speaker, mindset coach, and author of The Word Effect, 7 Simple Words to Create Your Most Beautiful Life, she empowers individuals and teams to shape their narratives and to achieve their true ambitions. With a passion for cultivating language and speaking success into existence, Becky guides individuals and teams in harnessing intentional language to navigate challenges and cultivate a life filled with joy and fulfillment. She's married to her high school sweetheart. She's the mother of 5 and the grandmother of 2. We already talked about the joys of being grandparents.
Yes.
Becky loves early morning walks, watching baseball games in the sunshine, and vacationing at Lake Powell with her family. Becky, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I always love looking at these things in the bio. Writing a book, that is not easy. Was it easy for you?
No.
Okay.
No, it wasn't. It's not that it's not easy. It just, you have to honor a commitment to yourself to do it, right? I think anyone could write a book. It's just taking the time to do it. And there's always something else that will take your time. It's like anything.
Exactly.
You just have to be committed to your dream instead of everybody else's.
Right. You have to be intentional about it.
For sure.
I've talked with people about that. I've written some books myself, and it's so easy isn't the right word. It's simple to publish now, so much more simple than it ever has been with Amazon and things like that.
Yes.
The siren song of wanting to have a commercial publisher is definitely out there. I usually counsel against it. I say self-publish, keep all your intellectual property to yourself, and then you can use it however you want for the rest of your life. So.
For sure. Yeah, there's lots of options out there, and definitely if you want to write a book, you can. And I think everybody has a book inside of them, truly. They have words that matter to them.
Absolutely.
And to share. And that's how we learn and grow together.
When did you have the idea to write it?
Well, since I was a little girl, I always wanted to write a book. I always wanted to be on a stage as a speaker. That was like a dream of mine. But I didn't ever pursue those things. I let fear, I let comparison of others, hold me back. And it was about 10 years ago when I started to find my help with the power of words. And I was kind of in my own mental health crisis at the time. And as I came out of that, the idea was take what you're learning and let that be your book. And so I took what I learned with the power of words, and that's what the 7 words are. They're the steps to get you moving your story forward. So it's kind of, I think most people's books, they take something that they've learned or experienced, and then they share it, hoping that maybe it will help somebody else.
Right. I love that. In psychology, the power of words, it's huge, because our beliefs fuel our emotions all day long. Any therapist will tell you that, any life coach will tell you that, that's just standard fare, and it's true as well. And our beliefs are almost, when we think about them, we phrase them in words, right? We make a statement about ourselves, like you may have said more than 10 years ago, I'm too busy to write a book or something. And that's the belief. And so then you don't have the time, and there's the frustration and stuff like that. But until you realized and changed that narrative for yourself and said, no, I can do this, or I am going to do this, then it became a reality.
Yeah. I used to think, and that's a story that I share when I speak to companies, is just changing that narrative just a little bit. Because I used to think there's not an original idea. Like, I need a new original idea, and everything's out there. And I would go into a bookstore and think there's no room for me to put a book out here. And then I changed just a little bit, instead of thinking I can't do it, and I changed to I can. And I thought, if all these people can write a book, I can too, right? And so just by flipping that little narrative, the way you talk to yourself, it really does make a difference. It does still require us to take effort and work and commitment and all the things, but you have to believe it first. Because if you don't believe in your dream, it won't ever happen.
And I don't even know if we need an original idea.
We don't.
I think almost all the ideas have happened.
That's what I've come to realize. And that's what's so funny is I'm talking about words. Words have been around since the creation of the universe. That's how things were created, were through words.
Right.
So it doesn't have to be an original idea. What makes it original is it's from my point of view.
Right.
It's my story. And I talk about putting on words, and someone else might talk about words in this way. And it gives people an awareness or a fresh way to look at things. Because, yeah, I think all ideas are out there. It's just we need reminders.
Right.
And that's probably what you have at this podcast, constant reminders
Exactly.
of truths. So,
My first cousin is Stephanie Meyer, who wrote the Twilight
okay.
series.
Yes.
And I tell people all the time, it's not a super original idea. I mean, it's the idea of someone needing help, damsel in distress,
Yes.
that trope's been around for millennia.
Yes.
But she put just a little spin on it, and did vampires and werewolves instead of that. And, she's doing okay for herself.
Yeah, she is. Yeah, she is.
But yeah, just those little things. And I think with our mental health, sometimes people think, well, we need these huge changes, but we don't. We just little changes, even just a unique perspective or a slightly changed perspective on something can change multiple things. And then you start to see the world differently, and then that affects other things. And so it's not as complex a process as people make it out to be. It's difficult. It's hard to get out of those mindsets that you've had for a very, very, very long time. But it's not complicated. I don't think.
Well, I like to think about it. What I talk about is the power of putting on words. And so when I started to figure out words had power, I had started a positive t-shirt and apparel business called Becoming Threads. This was back in 2014, and I started it with my sister-in-law. And we could honestly go into our closet and consciously decide what words we were going to put on that day by the t-shirt we chose. And we had all different t-shirts. Keep It Simple was a very popular one. I do enough, I have enough, I am enough was another popular one. Grateful Heart. There was just different sayings, and they were little reminders. And what I've come to realize and feel like is the truth for all of us is that, yes, change does take consistency, and it takes persistence and diligence, yes. But it doesn't have to be so complex, and you need to just start to think about the way you talk to yourself every day. Most of us will think more about what we wear today than the way we talk to ourselves. Because we'll look outside and we'll go, okay, it's sunny, it's warm, I'm going to wear flip-flops and shorts. Or, oh, it's starting to get stormy, I'm going to wear a sweatshirt. We choose things. We actually get to choose what we focus on too. And so when we get in those negative thought patterns, we can choose to redirect.
Right.
And that's what these words kind of help people learn how to redirect. Because these are words that we all use every single day. The 7 power words in my book are the power of acknowledge, the power of ask, the power of acceptance, the power of abundance, the power of action, the power of appreciation, and the power to aspire. So they're all words that we know. I haven't come up with some random obscure word or made up something, but I'm teaching people to let words be your compass, because we're hearing way too often people are feeling stuck in anxiety, depression, and they're feeling helpless. And words actually can give us hope if we choose them correctly.
Exactly, because it's words that are keeping us stuck in the anxiety and depression.
Exactly.
That those narratives that we have that are running over and over in our heads all day long, most of the time outside of our awareness. We don't realize them. I remember years ago, a friend of mine who she was just very, very negative. She'd had a rough life, and so she came by it honestly, but she had just terrible, terrible self-esteem. And we would have a conversation together, and I started to count the number of pejorative things she'd say about herself, and it was like 5 or 6 per minute almost. I mean, and I thought, this poor woman, because if she's saying that out loud to me, then what she's saying to herself in her own head.
Exactly.
And once we become aware of that, then we do have the option. It takes practice to become aware of your thoughts. That's not something that I think comes naturally to a lot of people. But once you can become aware of them, then you can stop and say, no, wait a minute. Is that something I want to be saying to myself? Or do I want to choose another word or another, phrase or descriptor for this particular mood or situation that I'm in?
Yeah. I like to, when I coach people, I like to talk about fact versus story.
Yeah. Because
our brain gives us a lot of stories. We meet someone and we start assessing how much money they make, how successful they are, how happy they are. We start, and we are quick to judge everybody else, but we have to become intentional with ourselves and learn to keep our focus on ourselves and not start filling in the stories with what we think are facts.
Right.
So it's just challenging what maybe we have been going through. The thing about the power of words, what I found is some people really gravitate to it, but there will be some people that will go, I'm not going to try that. And that's what they choose.
Sure.
We can stay pessimistic if we want to, or we can choose something else. And that's what I love about words is we all have access to them. So it's just bringing an awareness to the words we put on, what we think about. I like to say this, what we think about, we bring about. And, there's some truth to that. And you're expressing that with that friend of yours.
Yeah.
You could see that a lot of the direction of their lives was determined by what they kept thinking about.
Right.
The National Science Foundation, I did a study, and they said that 80% of our thoughts are negative. Most human beings have anywhere between 30 to 60,000 thoughts a day.
Right.
A lot of them are subconscious. If 80% of those are negative, no wonder, the world is kind of how it is. It's kind of like we turn on the news and all we hear is negativity. We have to have equal airtime for positive things in our life.
Totally agree.
Because if all we see is the negative, we're going to be scared, laying in our bed, not wanting to go out into the world. But there's like this beautiful world to live. And that's what I want to help people see is you can create a beautiful life, even with the negative things. It's just the opposition of living.
Right. Because it's out there. You just have to turn your focus to that, right?
Yes.
I've often compared it to like a court case where only the prosecution gets to present.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're like, well, this guy wins all the time. The judge rules in this guy's favor all the time. Well, of course, because it's the only perspective being presented. You have to be intentional about that and say, and like you said, negativity for whatever reason tends to be the predominant nature of our thoughts. But there are just amazing, beautiful things out there. We just have to take the time. I remember years ago, I was a missionary for my church in Mexico. And one of the most fascinating things to me, they had nothing or almost nothing, sometimes they had houses but very, very meager, mostly living hand to mouth. They didn't have bank accounts that had, $1,000 in them or $100,000 or whatever. But to listen to them talk, they were always so grateful. Yeah. They were thankful for things like the sun and the beautiful air today. And I was thinking, it's almost like they were going out of their way to find the good things that they could be grateful for. And they were happy. They were way happier than I was than I had 1,000 times more than they had. But because of their focus on things, and I have remembered that now these 30 years, just how important that was, and tried to focus on that in my own life, tried to say, okay, because there's bad stuff in my life, difficult things.
We all have it,
exactly.
Right? We all have opposition. We all have hardship. One of the things I want to just touch on with the negative thoughts that we have, a lot of it has to do with just our brains are wired to protect us. Right. And so when our brain thinks that something could go wrong, it says, get away from this. So back to me writing the book, the biggest challenge and hurdle for me was my own self, because my brain was telling me, you've never done this before. This is scary.
Right.
What if someone rejects you? What if someone says no? What if someone laughs at you? What if your idea is considered stupid? All those things. And that's what holds us back, because then we fixate there. And then those thoughts are like, oh, I better not do it. And what we think about makes us feel a certain way, and our feelings, as you know, create our actions, and our actions create our results. So it is something that we have to learn to redirect. We are going to still have negative thoughts. I just got back from a family trip, and I'm trying to get back into things, and I had to almost say that same thing, like, I'm so grateful it's a beautiful day today, and I'm so grateful I have a busy schedule, and I'm grateful because all of a sudden you want to fixate on, oh, I got to go back to work.
I'm not on vacation
I'm not on
anymore.
vacation. And then you miss out on the joy you had on vacation, and then you miss out on the productivity that you get to do today, right? So it's something we practice, and I'm not here to say that I've got it mastered. I'm just here to say this is a good plan. If you're finding yourself stuck, try to redirect and see if this will work for you.
Yeah.
Just becoming intentional.
Well, it's helpful to know that that kind of our biology is a little against us that way, Yeah. It just how we're wired, but we can rewire our brains all the time.
Yes.
Everybody, that's the wonderful thing about the brain, is that it's almost dispassionate. It's like, I don't really care. Just whatever you feed me, I'm going to reinforce. And you feed me more of something, I'm going to get really good at thinking that, just because you're giving me 100, 30,000 of those thoughts every day. So we're going to be very, very good at repeating those thoughts and archiving those
Yes.
thoughts and keeping them present in your mind, because clearly this is what you're interested in. Right. And so, but we have control over what we put there to our brain. And then I talk about, I say, have you ever met people who are just unsufferably happy? They're just, and some people that it bugs them because they're like, oh my gosh, this person's just happy all the time. Well, it's because they've practiced happiness
They
so
choose
long
it.
that their brain now is just a happy brain, and their brain automatically chooses happiness, even in a terrible situation, because it's the thing that it's been fed for the past, 15, 20 years.
Well, all of our brains have a reticular activating system. You're probably familiar with that. But a simple way to describe it is our brain is just a processor. And so whatever our brain thinks we're interested in, it's going to show us more of them.
Right.
So a simple way to describe that would be, I want a new red 4Runner. Well, when I decide that that's what I want, I start seeing more red 4Runners out there. It's not that Toyota is starting to make more of them. It's just my brain has become attuned to that.
Right.
And then I'm seeing it more and more. Well, it's the same thing with our thoughts. So if we think negatively, our brain's like, oh, let me show you more problems in your life. And it grows, right? Instead of like redirecting.
Right.
And that's the difference, is how some people find joy and some people find misery. Now, I know we do have hard things in our lives, and I'm not saying there's not a time for sadness or for grief or for even anger at times. That there's all those emotions have to be felt. We can't just be happy every minute, but we don't have to stay stuck there. We can get back into the gratitude. And that's why one of the power words is appreciate, because as you learn to appreciate your life, it will actually appreciate and grow.
Right. That makes me, then I'll be thankful for my car instead of upset about the scrape on the bumper, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, there's things that make us upset, right? We
Sure.
don't like those things, but do we stay stuck there
Exactly,
forever?
yeah.
Then we miss out on the good.
So in your work with businesses, because I imagine that, well, I don't imagine, I know that the tone that is set from the top down in any organization is going to affect the employees, and it's going to affect their feelings, their thoughts, their mental health. So what's the counsel you give when you work with them? Like, how do you help them create, I guess, healthier, happier environments?
Well, I think the first step is awareness. Before you can have anybody change, it's becoming aware that maybe I want to change. I don't like to go in and just say, do this, this, and this. I want people to understand, oh, there is power in words. Maybe I want to redirect and rethink things. I don't want to just tell you what to do and say, do these 3 things and your life gets better, right? So it's bringing an awareness to leaders and then teaching them how to become more intentional with their words, realizing that their tone affects everything.
Yep.
And a lot of their tone comes from what they're thinking. So yes, being a leader, you have added stress and you have added maybe benchmarks you have to meet or different things. But, the truth is everybody that is working has stress.
Exactly.
And everybody has things. So learning how to become a better communicator, learning how to be a good listener, and then learning how to bring the team along, right? It's so much easier doing work together when you're working together than when you're like trying to pull everybody. And I really think it has to do with words. It has to do with becoming intentional to your words, getting people to see the big vision and to get on your team, if you're leading, to move things forward. So it's practice. It's definitely practice.
Right. So leaders, so anyone out there who's listening, who's thinking, how am I going to manage my team better? It starts with you, right? It starts with developing that awareness, almost doing like in the 12-step program, a fearless self-inventory, right? And just saying, what am I about? What kind of, what kind of language am I using when I talk to people? What kind of vibe am I communicating? Even just being around the office. And then if you can get kind of an idea about that, then you can make an assessment, right? You can say, oh, and I'm doing wonderful with this and everyone's happy. Or, oh, I think I may have found part of the problem, right? Why everyone's so gloomy here.
So the first 3 words in the word effect framework, the first word is acknowledge. So a leader would want to acknowledge, and I would start having them acknowledge what's going well first. Let's focus on the celebrations, because if we focus on the negative, it grows. So we want to focus on the positive. Like, what are some really good things that are happening? Or what am I seeing that I do well as a leader? And then we ask ourselves the question, what do I want to improve? Or what would I like to see improved? And we start to acknowledge that. And then we get to choose Do I want to work on that? And if we choose to do it, the next power word is the power of asking. And then we start to ask better questions. And I like to have people ask the question, phrasing it with how. How do I entice the team to buy into this idea? How do I motivate this sector of people or whatever, right? What does that look like? And then start writing your ideas down. And then you take one at a time. And that third power word is accept. Sometimes as leaders, we get really excited and we want to change everything today. And change does take time. And a lot of it's through example. So intentional leadership comes with intentional language. It's that leading by example. And then people will start to buy into that. But, I think back when my parents, they used to go away to these conferences and they'd come home to be better parents. And they'd come home after a week long of learning and they'd be like, okay, we are going to do this, this, and this. And they were super excited. And then like 3 days later, like all the kids are fighting back. I'm one of 6 kids. It's not working. They put their hands in the air and they quit. And we're glad.
Get the money back from the conference, right?
Yeah, like none of this works. And I think about that so often in my own life because don't we sometimes get really motivated to change? And then it's not always as easy as we think. And that's the practice of learning to become consistent and learning to keep practicing it and then evaluating, okay, what's going well? Where can I improve? Asking questions, accepting, keep moving you forward. The fourth power word goes into abundance, and that's what you learn to tune yourself to is that thinking that good things are happening, that good is coming, that change is taking place. It just maybe is a little slower. It's like planting a seed. We plant the seed and the plant isn't there for several months. You have to cultivate it and work it. That's how we are as humans too.
It always makes me wonder if you and I would have been out of jobs 100 years ago or 200 years ago, right? Because there was kind of built into the way people lived their lives was this idea of having to be patient and having to wait and having to work for a long time at things without really any noticeable results in order to eventually achieve the goal that you wanted. Like you said, planting a seed. And almost everyone, that's what they did. They grew their farms, grew their gardens and stuff so they could eat. And now we live in a society where everything's provided for us. Well, at least in like most Western societies, everything's provided. And I think it's become trickier because we say, well, we want that with our behaviors and with our mental health. We say, well, where's the 2-day delivery on that too? I want my 2-day anxiety fix. I was browsing on the internet the other day and saw a 21-day mental health fix. And so I went down the rabbit hole to learn about that.
See about it. Yes.
I thought, oh, good heavens, anything of substantial value just takes a lot of hard work and a lot of consistency and time. And that's the good news too, because we get better at things when we do them more frequently. And so I don't think we even want the 2-day fix or the 21-day fix. You want to look back at years of experience and think of all the things that you learned through that, all the growth that you achieved. And that growth is going to stick because you've been doing it so consistently for so long. Yeah.
In my bio, it mentioned that I love going to Lake Powell with my family.
Yes.
And those that are familiar with Lake Powell, it's beautiful and there's water and it's so much fun, but it is a lot of work. And we have taken our kids, I have 5 children, we've taken them since they were little consistently. Inevitably, a tire blows, the boat isn't working, we have a problem with the houseboat, someone gets sick. I mean, there's just something. You have to load all your stuff up, pack it onto the houseboat, and you have to unload it all. You have to bring all your food, take all your food off, right? Like there's no vacation in vacation, right? And one time we were driving home and I said to my husband, is this even worth it?
Why are we doing this?
Why are we doing this? And he looked at me and he said, Becky, anything of value takes work. But it's so true because we are getting more and more accustomed to because we watch everybody else and we just see the happy. We see them on social media, the smile, everything's well. And so we just start telling ourselves a story that that's their fact, that they don't have ups and downs and in-betweens because we all do as human beings. But anything of value is work, and your mental health is of value because it creates the success of your life. And you can actually start to speak it by becoming intentional to it. and just finding little avenues to redirect your brain. You don't have to do everything today. Like, thank goodness I didn't have to figure this out in 21 days. I've been working on this for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And even before that, I was negatively working on it. So I have a lot of story where I found myself negatively thinking. I had so many beautiful things in my life, but I was focused on, when my kids grow up, then I can be. When my husband makes more money, then I can be. I was always looking for some exterior thing to make me happy. But the truth is, happiness is found within.
Right.
And you have to direct it. So.
Yeah. And if you keep looking for it, you'll never find it. And if you think it's associated with some future event, that's when I'll be happy, you just don't. It's almost a curse that Western nations have, because we spend a lot of time regretting the past, we spend a lot of time worrying about the future, and we don't spend a lot of time in the present.
Yeah.
And some other cultures are very, very good about that, about being very present in the moment. I think there's just a lot of peace that can happen when you do that. Not that you shouldn't think about, you learn from the past and you need to anticipate the future, but we give, I remember reading a book in graduate school, and it's such an eloquent phrase, and I don't remember it exactly, but it said that we dwell on the past and distress about the future over the knife edge of the unlived present.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, what a great visual, just that little tiny edge. That's all we have right now, but everything is present. All we have is present, right?
Yes.
Past is gone, future isn't here. All we have is right now. And if we're just aware of that, I love what you've said multiple times now about fact versus story. I think if anyone takes anything away from this podcast, that's such a simple thing, right? Story is what you tell yourself about things, filled in with all sorts of crazy details that may not be true. Get the facts first.
Yeah. Just ask yourself, are these facts?
Exactly.
And your brain will be like, oh, that's not a fact.
Right.
That's not a fact. And then you get to separate it, and then you get to choose what you think about that situation, because it's so easy to fill in all the narrative with the negative, and then we just don't even question it, and then it becomes a belief.
Exactly. And right, and then it becomes our fact, right?
Yes, our truth.
Yeah,
and it's really not the truth that we need.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and it can be more distressing than it needs to be. So
yeah.
Becky, thank you so much for coming and sharing your wisdom and knowledge.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for listening today. Remember that change starts with you, and together we work to increase our mental health momentum.